7 o'clock, councillors, and I declare the meeting open. May we, the councillors of Ku-ring-gai, always be aware that decisions we make affect the daily lives of those we represent. May we make these decisions with knowledge and goodwill, respecting the views of others, and may we show ourselves worthy to follow in the footsteps of those who have protected the special qualities of Ku-ring-gai for over 100 years. Amen. On behalf of Council, I recognise the traditional custodians of the land, the Ku-ring-gai people on whose land we meet. I would like to outline a few points regarding this evening's proceedings. Tonight's meeting will be live streamed on the Council website at www.krg.nsw.gov.au/live stream. Only councillors and council staff will be shown on camera. The webcast of the meeting is available on Council's website. The webcast will commence once the Mayor is seated and will cease if Council goes into a confidential session, where the public and press are excluded, pursuant to Section 10 of the Local Government Act. Council meetings remain open to the public as observers, but in line with the Code of Meeting Practice, speakers will now address the Council through the monthly public forums and not at Council meetings. For more information about addressing Council, please visit our website at www.krg.nsw.gov.au. Let's rock on in. Apologies. All councillors are present this evening, so there are no councillor apologies. General Manager, any staff apologies?
There are none from the staff, Mr Mayor.
Declarations of interest. I call for any declarations of interest from councillors. Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I declare a non-significant, non-pecuniary interest in item GB2, Council sponsorship applications. I am a council-appointed member of the Kids Youth Development Service Management Committee. Kids is one of the 9 charities that may benefit financially from the Bob and Head Cycle Classic, so I believe it is appropriate for me to leave the chambers during debate on the matter.
Thank you, Councillor Nye. Any further declarations from councillors? Councillor Spencer.
A friend of mine, this is in relation to GB1. A friend of mine is a director of CAS and Meals on Wheels. There is no pecuniary interest or significant conflict, and therefore I will remain in chamber for the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. General Manager, are there any...
Sorry, there's another
You've
one.
got another one? Fire away, Councillor Spencer. I didn't expect 2.
NM2, my ability to remain impartial is contaminated, as I recently signed the contract to commence work on Norman Griffiths, and therefore I will not be in chamber for the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. General Manager.
There are none from the staff, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Documents circulated to councillors. General Manager.
Mayor and councillors, we have late councillors' information containing 3 items. GB19, consideration of submissions. Planning proposal for 47 Worrain Road, Roseville Chase. That's a memo from the Manager Governance and Corporate Strategy of yesterday's date. A question without notice in relation to Freedom of Information GIPA request regarding the Linfield Hub project. That is a response signed by me of today's date. And in relation to C1, St Ives Medieval Fair 2022, a confidential memorandum from the Mayor to all councillors of today's date.
Thank you, General Manager. Confirmation of reports to be considered in closed meeting.
Mr Mayor and councillors, there is one report per se, C1, St Ives Medieval Fair 2022, and there are attachments for 2 items. GB 22, which is RFT 12 2021, Plumbing and Electrical Emergency and Maintenance Services, attachments 1 and 2, and GB 23 RFT 15 2021, Streetscape Upgrade Stage 2, St John's Avenue, Gordon, attachments 1 and 2.
Thank you, General Manager. We move to confirmation of minutes. Yep. And I also need a motion to remain that those items remaining confidential. Moved Councillor Smith, seconded Councillor Spencer. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council, 11th of January 2022. I call for somebody to move to Councillor Spencer, seconded Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That is unanimous. We move on to minutes from the Mayor, and I will read this one out because it's very important, which is MM1 2022 Australia Day Honours and Citizen of the Year Awards. I am pleased to inform you that 8 Ku-ring-gai citizens, through their outstanding achievements and services to the community, have been awarded 2022 Australia Day Honours. We are very proud to have these dedicated and talented Australians as members of the Ku-ring-gai community. I would like to read you the names of these special Ku-ring-gai citizens and on behalf of Council congratulate them on their excellent contributions to Australian society. Philippa Bloomfield, OAM of Turramurra, for services to youth through Girl Guides. Ian Frame, OAM of South Turramurra, for service to the community through a range of organisations. Dr Jeffrey Herkes, AM of Pymble, for significant service to medicine as a neurologist, to medical research and to professional associations. Louise Mahoney, OAM of Wurrunga, for service to the community through charitable organisations. Dr Graham Morgan, AM of Roseville, for significant service to medicine through radiation oncology practice and research. Alexander Purnell, OAM of Kalara, for service to sport as a gold medalist at the Tokyo Olympic Games 2000. Lydia Sharpen, OAM of Wurrunga, for service to the community through a range of organisations. The late David Timms, OAM of Turramurra, for services to the mineral sector. I also congratulate Ku-ring-gai Citizen of the Year winners for 2020. Citizen of the Year, Helen Jarvis. Young Environmental Citizen of the Year, Oliver Connolly. Environmental Citizen of the Year, Jen Stokes. Mayor's Award for Outstanding Service by an Individual, Yoel Hyman. Mayor's Award for Outstanding Service by a community organisation, Easy Care Gardening. On behalf of Council, I congratulate all these award winners on their outstanding achievements. Ku-ring-gai should be proud that it has citizens being recognised at the highest levels for their selfless dedication, commitment and contribution to local, national and international communications. The recommendation is A, that Council acknowledge the outstanding contribution made by these recipients of the 2022 Australia Day Honours to the Ku-ring-gai community and to the well-being of our society. B, that the Mayor write to the recipients on behalf of Council to congratulate them on receiving their award, including a copy of the Mayoral Minute. Call on any councillors who may wish to speak to our recipients. They're being done.
Mr Mayor,
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
I will speak to this. It's actually, it's quite amazing the amount of people that actually do get the OAM in Ku-ring-gai, that we're very fortunate to have these type of people in the community amongst us. And I certainly, on behalf of all the councillors here tonight, I'm sure that we're all very respectful and appreciate everything that they've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Any other councillors wish to speak on the recipients? I'll just speak on a couple of them with Pip Bloomfield and Ian Frame, certainly of South Turramurra. Some wonderful service to the community over many years, some excellent recipients, and to all recipients, well done. If I just move that as. If I just move the Mayoral Minute as is, we don't need a seconder, and we're done. We need to vote on that. All those in favour? That's unanimous. We then move on to Mayoral Minute 2, review of the current nominations to the South Sydney North Planning Panel. Councillors, I'm sure you've all read the Mayoral Minute. There is a change to point C, which should be displayed on the screen, which expands on the amount of remuneration per determination. So I'll let you digest that. All good. I'm going to read A, B, C, D. The recommendation is A, council review and the current council nominations to the Sydney North Planning Panel, SNPP, following the 2021 New South Wales local government elections. There's a minor change in point B, that having reviewed the current council nominations, I nominate Councillor Smith and Councillor Wheatley to be the two council members to the Sydney North Planning Panel for the period of up to 3 years.
Nomination 2.
Point C, as printed on the screen, and point D, that council notify the Minister for Planning and the SNP Secretariat of its decision. With that, a Mayoral Minute is not required. Therefore, I move Mayoral Minute 2 as printed, including the minor change to point B and point C as on the screen. All those in favour?
Can I nominate a person, for the panel, in addition to the 2 that you've mentioned?
Councillor Kay, you will have to move an amendment.
Okay, I'll move an amendment then to have an additional person considered.
You will have to now nominate who it is.
Sorry?
You will have to nominate who it is.
I nominate Councillor Cedric Spencer.
So it's just the one you're nominating?
Yes, thank you.
You will need to nominate 2, as that's not valid, as we require 2 people.
I'll nominate Councillor Sam Knight then. Who were the other choices? Sorry.
I'm not really interested, so
Okay.
no thanks.
Can you clarify who the other 2 were?
Councillors Smith and Wheatley.
Can I nominate one of those? Okay, I nominate Councillor Wheatley.
So your amendment is that you are nominating Councillor Spencer and Councillor Wheatley.
That is correct. If that's okay.
We don't need a second for this. You will also require a seconder. Seconded, Councillor Spencer. Councillors, if you just wait and have till that amendment is on the screen. Councillors, we now vote on the amendment, which is Councillor Kay's amendment, unless there are any speakers to it. Councillor Greg Taylor.
Am I just able to ask a question of the nominated people and to find out what their experience is like in these positions?
Yes, we can do that. Yes, if you direct your question to the appropriate councillor.
Martin, what's your experience in this issue here? These matters?
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. I've taken a big interest in planning matters in Ku-ring-gai and also heritage. I've actually sat on the Heritage Reference Committee for the 5-year prior term, and in the last, I believe, 18 months to 2 years, I've actually been sitting on the SNPP, which I've actually got a great deal of experience in the planning matters. It's something that interests me. It's something that is, I believe, a very important position in council to represent our council in this position, in a position where we are in a state body where we've got to be quite often quite vocal and to the point on being able to ask the right questions into hopefully being able to deliver the right thing to our community.
Am I similarly allowed to ask Councillor Spencer, please?
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I was a member of SNPP for about 2 years, from 2017 to 2019, I believe. I believe there are some preferred experience and qualifications that is required to be a member of SNPP, and that includes someone with a background of planning, I believe, transport and law, and I hold some qualifications in transport management and law as well. And being a past member, I truly enjoyed my position there. We get to look at things holistically, what's suitable for Ku-ring-gai and so on. Thank you.
Nothing further, thank you.
Councillors, any further debate or questions across the nominees? There being none. Councillor Nye.
I might just speak quickly. I think it's fantastic that we've got 3 very strong candidates for the SNPP. I have served on the SNPP before for 2 years. It was a wonderful experience learning about planning and development law. I do believe Councillor Spencer has strengths in law, transport and planning. I do believe that both Councillors Wheatley and Smith have strength in land economics, and Smith in particular with heritage. It's great that we have such experience on our council to represent us on the SNPP. It's not the greatest of jobs in a sense, because you're only paid $500, but you have to spend a lot of time doing readings, 1,000 pages, 2,000 pages, ask the right questions, several meetings. So I'm just thankful to whoever the 2 end up being that, thank you for your service.
Thank you, Councillor Nye. There being no further discussions nor debate on this particular one, we will now vote on the amendment, which is Councillor Kay's amendment. All those in favour? That is Councillor Spencer, Councillor Kay, Councillor Alec Taylor and Councillor Nye. Those against? Councillors Wheatley, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Ward, Councillor Smith, Councillor Lennon and Councillor Pettit. The amendment is lost. We now then vote on the motion. Just wait till I get over. We'll just wait till staff bring that up on the screen for you. Good to go. Councillors, we're now voting on the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Kay, Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Wheatley, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Ward, Councillor Smith, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Nye, Councillor Pettit. Against? Councillor Spencer. Declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to petitions. We have one petition, PT1. And I seek somebody to move this particular petition. Councillor Smith.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move the petition 1, petition to stop removal of the left-hand turn from Ellalong Road into Burns Road before it's too late. As per the recommendation that the petition be received and referred to the appropriate officer of council for attention.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Also noting that there were 322 signatures.
Point of order.
Point of order, Councillor Spencer.
Could we read the prayer, please, for the petition, if there's one?
You must actually read what the petition was. Yep. Councillor Spencer, there is actually no requirement to read that, so it's not a point of order. But thank you anyway. So a seconder, Councillor Greg Taylor, thank you. I move the petition PT1. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Yes. Move on to general business. And I invite councillors to nominate any item on the agenda that they wish to have a site inspection. There being none, I invite councillors to nominate any item on the agenda that they wish to adopt in accordance with the officer's recommendation, allowing for minor changes without debate. Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to list these GB items one by one, and if any councillor wishes to debate it, feel free to say withdraw. And I might stop partway and let Councillor Smith do some as well. So GB1, 2021-22 Ku-ring-gai Community Grants Program, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded. Councillor Alec Taylor. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB3, Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee, Interim Extension of Appointment, External Independent Member, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB4, Investment Report as at 30th of November 2021, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Ward. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB5, Investment Report as at 31st of December 2021, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Ward. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB6, Investment Report as at 28th of January 2022, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Wheatley. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB7, Analysis of Land and Environment Court Costs, second quarter 2021 to 2022, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Wheatley. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB8, 2021 to 2022, Budget Review, second quarter ended December 2021, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Kay. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB9, Change of Meeting Date for May 2022, Ordinary Meeting of Council, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Ward. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB10, Superannuation Contribution Payments for Councillors, the officer's recommendation.
Withdraw.
Withdrawn by Councillor Smith.
GB11, Delegation of Authority, Mayor and Deputy Mayor for 2022-2023 term, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Wheatley. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB12, 2022 National General Assembly of Local Government Call for Motions, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Ward. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB 14, draft generic sports ground plan of management, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
And then I'll let Councillor Smith have a go since he's keen. Okay, I'll keep going then. GB 15, officer submission to New South Wales Government on contributions reform during the caretaker period, the officer's recommendation.
Withdrawn.
Withdrawn, Councillor Smith.
I was hoping for a short night. GB 16, biodiversity policy, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Kay. All those in favour? It's unanimous.
GB 17, Fitzsimmons Lane and Pacific Highway Gordon North streetscape upgrades, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Wheatley. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB 18, Environmental Planning and Assessment Statement of Expectations, Order 2021, the officer's recommendation.
Withdrawn.
Withdrawn by Councillor Smith.
Okay, and then I'll skip GB 19. GB 20, Ku-ring-gai Traffic Committee meeting dates for 2022, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB 21, the progress status report for February 2022, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
RFT 12-2021, plumbing and electrical emergency and maintenance services, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Ward. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB 23, RFT 15-2021, streetscape upgrade stage 2, St John's Avenue, Gordon, the officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Wheatley. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
I'll try C1, that council resolve to proceed with the Medieval Fair 2022 according to the terms discussed in the confidential memo dated 15th of February 2022.
So, Councillor I, you're moving my late memorandum.
Oh yes, moving the late memorandum from the Mayor.
Seconded, Councillor Kay. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
And then the last one I'll try, NM1, aligning public forum interactions with best practice, as printed.
Withdrawn.
Withdrawn by Councillor Smith.
Okay, so just in summary, we've not done 2, 10, 13, 15, 18, 19, and then 1.
Mr Mayor. If I
Councillor
may,
Tarr.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to add GB2, council sponsorship application, staff recommendation.
I'll just wait till Councillor Nye leaves the chamber. Seconded, Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That is unanimous. We can get Councillor Nye back in. We move to GB. Councillor Taylor, is there anything else you wish to move at this point in time?
Oh, no.
That's all right, not a problem. We then move to 10. Yes, we move back to GB 10, which was withdrawn by Councillor Smith. And I seek a motion.
Mr Mayor, if I may just ask a couple of questions to the appropriate officer in relation to this matter.
We need a seconder first. We need to move something first and have it
On
seconded.
GB 10?
Yep.
Just in relation to the superannuation contribution payment for councillors. I just wanted to confirm...
Councillor Smith, you need to move a motion first and then ask the questions
Yes.
with the seconder. Yep.
Yeah, I would like to move a motion that we reject the council officer's recommendation.
So your motion is that the superannuation contribution payments not be made.
Not be made, correct.
And I need a seconder for that. Is there a seconder? There being no... I'll second it
down.
for you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you.
Sorry, may I ask a question? It's a,
Yeah, I was,
Councillor Smith has the call at the moment.
it's
Has
a
moved the
point of
motion.
order question though. Is it right?
Yes, you have a point of order, Councillor Spencer?
Just seeking clarification whether is that a direct negative?
General Manager?
Mr Mayor and councillors, no, it's not, because that is the only motion on the floor. So if someone was to move now the officer's recommendation, that would be a negative or a negation, and you would have to foreshadow that and vote on Councillor Smith's motion first.
Understood. I apologise for my oversight.
That's
the-
quite all right, Councillor Spencer. Councillor Smith, proceed.
just in relation to the superannuation, so I just did want to, just for the benefit of all the councillors here, I just did want to understand where this money for the superannuation will come out of, to the relevant director.
Director Marshall?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's like any council expenditure, it comes from general revenue. So if this money is spent, something else won't be able to be done, just like any expenditure. But I can't point out exactly what that is because it's a big budget. So this will go into next year's budget and it'll be factored in like all the other expenditure. But it is a fact that if we spend money on one thing, it can't be spent on another.
Yep. All right. Look, I'll try and make this brief. I will be, obviously not in support of the superannuation. I feel as councillors, some of us are still currently employed. Others have no doubt got their superannuation funds. I believe that it's actually a privilege to be here to represent Ku-ring-gai. I believe that we're currently paid on the top end of the scale for the size of the council that we represent, and for these reasons I think that that money could be put in good use. So that's the reason why I've put the alternate motion in rejecting the council staff recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Nye, or the seconder of said motion, which was my good self. I will
No,
reserve my right at this particular point in time. Councillor Nye.
I believe
Oh, it's
Councillor
Councillor
Kay.
Kay, sorry.
okay, I've just got a question through the Mayor to Director Marshall, if I may. Is there an opt-out for individual councillors? So when we vote on this, is it the entirety, or would, for example, Councillor Smith say, I make the choice not to have super, whilst others do?
Director Marshall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm not aware of an opt-out facility, no. It's the council either resolves to pay councillors super or they don't. A councillor could always...
That's what I mean. So a councillor, so even if we resolve yes to pay super, a particular councillor could say, I opt not to have super paid. Is that an option?
I don't believe that is an option.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose you could say the same thing about the councillor fee. If a councillor said, I don't want the fee, I'm not sure what we would do with it. We can't force them to take it. So, look, I'd have to take that on notice as to whether or not a councillor can opt out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to speak against this current motion, and I'd like to foreshadow the motion with the officer's recommendation. And now I'll speak against the current motion, which Councillor Smith put forward. So Local Government New South Wales has been lobbying for a number of years to provide superannuation to councillors. It's something that's really strange in the local government world. If you work a job anywhere else, you get superannuation. More recently with reforms, if you get paid less than $400 a month, you also now get superannuation as just a lay work person. But if you're a director of a company, you get paid superannuation on top of your director's fee. However, in local government, we've got this strange, and our politicians, like the state and federal, they also get superannuation. But what's strange in local government is that we don't get superannuation. And local government New South Wales has been lobbying for years to get this included. It finally has the support from all the relevant authorities, and it's been considered as a great triumph. Why? I don't think it's necessarily because councillors are greedy and want money and all of that, but I think the real reason is it helps attract a better talent pool of councillors to represent our people and make good decisions. Now, one of the great barriers of entry for entering council is how little we get paid. So personally, as a councillor, I probably spend about 20 to 30 hours a week fulfilling my councillor duties on one of the sort of mid-range or slightly busier days and busier weeks. And if you think about it, we get paid $26,000 a year. That's about $500 a week. And if you go up to someone and say, look, you've only worked 2 or 3 hours that week, okay, 500 seems a bit excessive. But for those times when things get pretty hectic, you get 150 emails directed at you, all that sort of stuff, $500 a week isn't much of an incentive whatsoever to fulfill that job. And we've had this problem in the past where people have the qualities, have the skills, have the good character and motivations for running for council, but the moment they hear, oh, it's only $26,000 a year, they don't stand up because it's just not worth it. It's not worth the sacrifice to their family. What you end up with is you end up with candidates who potentially are a bit more well off from other sources of income. Only they apply to fulfill the role. The talent pool, like as I can see on this council, is actually quite good, but in some other cases, the talent pool could have been even better had the remuneration and had superannuation been offered. One of the other points that has been raised a lot is the triumph this is for women in local government, because as we know, at the moment, women in local government, it's below the 50% average, it's closer to 40%, that sort of thing. Now, by offering superannuation, it is yet one more incentive for women to put up their hand, run for government, and get good outcomes for our people. And just as a final point, yes, I do understand that if we don't pay superannuation, then Ku-ring-gai Council probably saves about $32,000 a year. But just imagine if the calibre of the councillors could be improved, even just a tiny bit. If you improve the calibre of the council, you could potentially make decisions that save much more than $30,000 or $32,000 per year. So I understand the frugality perspective, and personally, does the super make a massive difference in life? No, not necessarily. But I do believe that if we want greater representative in local government, it does help to have these reforms. I strongly support the reforms advocated by Local Government New South Wales and also by the state government. And I just put that for the council's recommendation when they consider whether or not to do anything on this point. Thank you.
One moment, Councillor Ward. Director Marshall does have the answer to Councillor Quay's question, so Director Marshall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I checked the legislation, and a councillor may forego the superannuation payment as long as he or she puts it in writing.
Thank you, Director Marshall.
So that's a yes.
Indeed, it's a big yes. Councillors, are there any...
I'm happy to second.
Not at this point in time, as it's just foreshadowed. So, councillors, we do have a foreshadowed motion by Councillor Nye. However, we are voting on Councillor Smith's motion. All those in favour of Councillor Smith's motion? Okay. Councillor Smith, Councillor Lennon. All those against? Councillor Spencer, Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Wheatley, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Ward, Councillor Nye, Councillor Pettit. The motion's lost. We now have a foreshadowed motion by Councillor Nye. And we require a seconder for that. Councillor Kay. Do you wish to speak to it? Councillor Nye, do you wish to speak to your foreshadowed motion?
Not at this stage, thank you.
And seconder?
I actually think Councillor Nye's been very thorough and I don't think he's actually missed anything, so.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Ward.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I just would like to ask a question of Councillor Nye, him indicating that we would get better councillors on the council. Is he suggesting we are not up to it?
Councillor Nye.
Thank you. I'm not. I think if you replay the video on YouTube, it's quite clear that I have been quite complimentary throughout this council meeting of all the councillors here. I was complimentary of all the candidates for SNPP. I was quite complimentary for all the councillors here in this room. But I do speak as a generalisation in the long term that if you offer greater remuneration and superannuation as well, you will tend to attract even more candidates in the election process, and you may theoretically potentially end up with a higher calibre of councillors. But if you replay the YouTube video, there's nothing derogatory said about any of the councillors here.
Thank you, Councillor Nye. I don't think Councillor Ward was insinuating anything derogatory. But having said that, we now have the motion, Councillor Nye, and seconded by Councillor Kay. All those in favour? That is Councillor Spencer, Councillor Kay, Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Wheatley, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Ward, Councillor Nye, Councillor Pettit. Against? Councillors Smith and Lennon. That is carried. We now move to GB 13. And I seek a motion. Councillor Smith.
Mr Mayor, I would like to put a motion forward nominating Councillor Ward for the representation and alternate position on the NESROC. Thank you.
So that's your point A plus points B and C as printed?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I seek a seconder for that. Councillor Lennon. Councillor Alec Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Am I at this point able to make a motion to amend this motion and recommend that we nominate Councillor Kay?
Yes, you need to put forward an amendment.
I'd like to put forward an amendment to the motion to nominate Councillor Kay.
So your point A would be that would be replacing Councillor Ward with Councillor Kay,
Yes.
and points B and C as printed on the screen.
Yes, thank you.
And I need a seconder for that. Second, Councillor Spencer. We'll just pause a moment as staff put that up on the screen. Yes. Now we're debating the amendment, which is Councillor Kay being the nominee as the alternate to NESROC. And are there any speakers on this matter?
If I may, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
You may.
So, all I'd like to say is that I think it is a good thing to share committees around across the group, and that I identified that Councillor Kay expressed some interest at our last meeting, and as I decided to stand down, I thought it was appropriate to nominate Councillor Kay. She's a member of a couple of committees, and I think this is a good opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. A seconder, Councillor Spencer.
I reserve my right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to speak briefly in support of this amendment. I do believe that ideally, as a united, council of 10, that we can spread around the responsibilities and the load. I do think that both Councillor Kay and Councillor Ward are very capable of fulfilling this task. And it's a wonderful experience. Having said that, I do acknowledge that Councillor Kay is relatively less load at this point in time. It would be a great opportunity to share the work around. But other than that, they're both fantastic candidates. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nye. I'll just make a quick comment. Please, councillors, remember this is an alternate to NESROC. That alternate will only be called upon to vote should the two delegates not be able to attend. So it is just an alternate position. Councillor Lennon.
So much just asked, Mr. Mayor. Is it possible to have two alternates? Or
Councillor Lennon, I do believe we already have two alternates.
I'm looking for a means to take on board Councillor Nye's very excellent and sensible comments. And Councillor Kay does have a lot to contribute. If there is scope to make another alternate, I would suggest that's welcome.
Don't believe there's an opportunity to make three. We already have Councillor Smith as one alternate. So we're voting on the second alternate position this evening. Any further speakers on the amendment? I will put Councillor Alec Taylor and Taylor's amendment. All those in favour? That's Councillor Spencer, Councillor Kay, Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Nye. Those against? Councillors Wheatley, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Ward, Councillor Smith, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Pettit. That amendment is lost. We now move back to the original motion and we vote on that particular motion. All those in favour? Being Councillors Wheatley, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Ward, Councillor Smith, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Nye, Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Pettit. Against? Councillors Spencer and Kay. The motion is carried. We now move to GB 15, and Councillor Smith withdrew that one. Councillor Smith.
Mr. Mayor, I'm assuming you want me to move a alternate motion prior to questions?
You can move whatever you wish, Councillor Smith.
I would just like to move an alternate motion that we write to the New South Wales Government on the contribution reforms. If I can indulge the staff on some assistance with this as well, would be great. In relation to what the impacts are going to be on Ku-ring-gai and its residents to the changes to our 711, Section 711 and 712 with the reforms that are in place. So I would just like it if we could write a letter, adopt it and send it off to the New South Wales Government on what the impacts are on Ku-ring-gai.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and I'll ask the General Manager and staff to help wordsmith this one. Director Marshall and Director Watson. Yep.
I do apologise, it was the last minute.
That's quite all right. We'll get there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know exactly what Councillor Smith is trying to achieve that we haven't already sought to achieve. We've made submissions. We can certainly turn those submissions into letters to ministers, if that's what Councillor Smith is after. But we certainly weren't necessarily glowing in our commentary, no.
Thank you for indulging me, but yes, I was hoping that we could send it to our local ministers, also the planning minister, on what the impacts are on the ratepayers of Ku-ring-gai.
So through you, Mr Mayor, it will be something along the lines of that council refer its submissions on these matters to the local members and the relevant ministers with a summary of the perceived impacts on Ku-ring-gai Council or something of that nature. Looks like it's under control.
As a point C. So Councillor Smith, you're happy to move A and B plus the new point C? Correct. Excellent. That's fine. Director Watson, the wording up on the screen, do you see any issues with that?
I certainly know exactly what Councillor Smith was intending, Mr Mayor.
That's excellent. Councillor Smith, I think we need a seconder if you're happy with that particular motion. Seconded Councillor Alec Taylor. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just briefly speak to this, and I feel as councillors, we all understand what the impacts are reading through on the papers here. I think it is very important that we do bring this to our local members directly from the council so that they can see what the impacts are and what we currently are struggling with. So I would really appreciate everybody's support on this, just purely communicating the position for our ratepayers of Ku-ring-gai. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And a seconder, Councillor Alec Taylor.
Just strongly support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Alec Taylor. And Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just quickly like to state my support for this. I think it's very helpful to get a bit more clarity on what impacts it may have, very specifically from the state government directly to us. There's a lot of, say the recent rate increase of 0.7%, that's going to impact us substantially. And so then to be at another point from another angle with developer contributions being impacted on that front as well, it does make our job as a council hard to deliver the services that our residents expect. So I'd encourage all to support Councillor Smith's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nye. Councillors, it is important to work with our state members, local government, state government, federal government, whilst we all have our differences, but if we can work together to achieve better outcomes, it's certainly worth pursuing. And Councillor Smith, well done on this one. Thank you. There being no further speakers on that, I move the motion. All those in favour? That is unanimous. GB 18, which was withdrawn by Councillor Smith again. Big night for you, Councillor Smith.
Mr Mayor, again on a similar mindset, just in relation to GB 18, the Environmental Planning and Assessment Statement of Expectations, I would like to move very much of the similar vein to GB 15 in relation to writing to our local members and putting it forward what the impacts are again in trying to deal in basically having to deal with the planning expectations that are put upon Ku-ring-gai. So again, if I could indulge, Mr Mayor, through you, to Director Watson.
Director Watson.
In some wording that we can get the same type of...
Mr Mayor, the council write to the local members reinforcing the effects of the current statement of expectations in relation to planning and assessment.
We'll just get that up on the screen for you, councillors. Councillor Smith, you happy with the wording up on the screen?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. And I seek a seconder for that. Seconded.
Sorry, when you say local members, can we put the New South Wales local members?
The state members?
Name them.
The local state members?
Yeah, I'm happy with
Local
state,
members
because
of
it could be
parliament.
referring to Fed.
Councillor Ward?
Mr. Mayor, I was just saying that we could say the local members of parliament.
Local state members of parliament? That semantics? Yep. All good? Thank you, Councillor Spencer. All right, we're all happy with that. We need a seconder for that. Councillor Ward. Councillor Smith.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Again, I believe that we were all at the briefings and we've got a great understanding of what the impacts are going to be on our staff and operations to actually meet these planning expectations. It's going to be a very difficult job in the sense of the demands, keeping the quality of the work that our staff currently do, and I think it's going to be a very challenging period. So I really believe that we just need to communicate this again to our local members so that they do understand and hopefully can communicate this through all the path of New South Wales Government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Ward.
I didn't have anything further to add.
That's quite all right, Councillor Ward. And again, Councillor Smith, well done on this, adding those sort of particular points in. We are engaging more and more with our state members, and I think that's extremely important going forward with challenging times ahead of us. There being no further speakers on the matter, I put this motion. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Councillors, we move on to GB 19. This was withdrawn by. And I seek a motion for GB 19. Councillor Smith. Councillor Nye.
Yes, I would like to move the officer's recommendation on GB 19.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Is there a seconder for that? I'm happy to second GB 19. So you can speak on that, Councillor Smith.
Yes, I think as being a prior councillor in the last four odd years, we've had the opportunity of having a great deal of briefings in regarding what these type of assets are and what we need to do with them and how short we are on actual funds. We've actually all got a lot of projects that we're trying to deliver to the residents of Ku-ring-gai, and it's unfortunately there's times there where we've got to make some tough decisions, and I believe that this decision needs to be made is because there's going to be quite a number of other projects and everything that will not be able to be delivered or will be impacted if we don't start to make these tough decisions. So I'm hoping to get the support of the councillors, that they indulge indulge us on this in the sense that we've had plenty of briefings, plenty of costings, and that ultimately, as a councillor, it's very difficult at times, but we've got to make these tough decisions. So, and I would like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. As seconder, I will reserve my right at this particular point in time to allow other speakers. Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment, which I believe may be available on the screen.
Thank you, Councillor Nye. We'll just bring that up on the screen for all councillors to read.
Apologies as it's quite long, but I'll read out this amendment. We move that Council recognises that there was an attempt in the previous Council term to rezone the entirety of 47 Worrain Road, Roseville Chase, 10,110 square metres, to R3 medium density residential via planning proposal, and that, point 1, in response to the planning proposal, the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment issued a gateway determination in 2020 that the planning proposal be revised from R3 medium density residential to R2 low density residential, and point 2, the reduction from R3 to R2 had a significant impact on the realisable gain from the potential sale of the site. According to the March 2020 market advice that is publicly available in the ordinary meeting of Council 28 April 2020, GB 13 attachment A8, the estimated land purchase cost of R3 was $29 million, and the land purchase cost of R2 was substantially lower at $11 million. Point B, that Council recognises that there has been a precedent at other councils to consult with the community regarding the future of former lawn bowling sites. For example, point 1, a Tarman Bowling Club site, which following community consultation was converted by Willoughby Council to a parklands district, including the community garden, open space, outdoor exercise area and children's playground. The clubhouse is being renovated to become community rooms and family barbecue. Point 2, Northbridge Bowling Club site, which following community consultation was converted by Willoughby Council to a cafe with community hall, garden, open space and children's playground. And point 3, Kensington Bowling Club site, which following community consultation was converted by Randwick Council to a community centre with grounds used for a half basketball court, fields for a five-a-side soccer, seniors outdoor gym and car parking. Point C, that Council recognises that regarding another disused bowling club site, West Linfield in 2009, it had consulted with the community and then repurposed it for active recreation of futsal. Point D, that Council recognises that prior to lodging planning proposals for 47 Worrain Road, Roseville Chase, the community had not been consulted to explore alternate uses for the land. Point E, that Council recognises that there are limited open space options in Roseville Chase for residents to let their dogs roam off-leash, go for a jog, kick a ball and let the kids have safe play. The closest options are 1, Echo Point Park, located 1.1 kilometres on foot, requiring residents to walk on the road as there is no footpath or nature strip for large stretches of Babbage Road. Point 2, Roseville Chase Oval, located 0.9 kilometres on foot but with no safe footpath and very challenging terrain. Point 3, Castle Cove Park, located 1.4 kilometres on foot. And point 4, Malga Avenue West Playground, Crown land located 0.3 kilometres on foot but with such dimensions that it is not adequate for most forms of recreation other than a narrow demographic. Point F, that Council recognises that there have been approaches to former mayors, former and current councillors, and council staff by members of the public as well as multiple sporting groups regarding retaining 47 Worrain Road, Roseville Chase for community use. Point G, that the appropriate next step is to put the current planning proposal to a stop, consult with the community and reassess our options. Point H, that in accordance with Section 3.35, Part 4 of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, Council writes to the Minister requesting that the planning proposal for 47 Worrain Road, Roseville Chase be determined to not proceed. Point I, that Council immediately commences consultation with residents in Roseville Chase as well as other interested stakeholder groups such as sporting groups to explore alternate community uses for 47 Worrain Road. Throughout the consultation process, Council must recognise that, 3.1, the surrounding land is currently zoned R2 low-density residential, and future community use should be sympathetic to the character of the area. Point 2, as hinted in DPI's Housing Strategy Letter of Approval dated 16 July 2021, there will likely be R3 medium-density residential in this suburb next decade. It is argued that with increasing density to the area, it is even more critical to retain some suitable open community space in the local area. And point 3, while it is important to retain open community space in the local area, that space does not necessarily have to be 10,110 square metres. In other words, a part sale of land via a separate planning proposal may provide greater planning merit, greater financial returns, and still provide substantial community benefit than the current planning proposal of full site rezone at R2.
And seconder for that, Councillor Alec Taylor. Councillor Nye, do you wish to speak to your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the motion should be self-explanatory, and I hope my speech is shorter than the motion. The history of this is, it goes back towards the beginning of last council term, where a lot of councillors were excited about things that could happen in Ku-ring-gai. We were excited about St Ives basketballs, excited about Marion Street Theatre, excited about Linfield Village Green, and potentially renovating a community centre in East Linfield as well. And the challenge put forward to us by council staff was that, look, it's great to have all these ideas, but we can't actually achieve everything without necessarily selling some of our existing assets. And they said it's not a complete loss. You're recycling an asset, you're selling an asset, and using that money to go towards other assets that may potentially be of greater use. Now, in that environment, I felt that we as a council, or I felt that I myself anyway, as a councillor, I jumped to the conclusion too quickly. I jumped to this proposal of selling bowling greens, which was put forward to us by council staff. At the time, it looked like quite a promising option. If we could potentially sell Roseville Chase Bowling Green and the Gordon one as well at about $30 million each at R3, then that would go a long way to meeting some of the other needs that we have across Ku-ring-gai. Now, what's happened since then is that there's this whole point of community consultation. I do regret having made that decision or contributing to that decision last council term. It was my mistake. I own up to the mistakes that I make, and I'm seeking to make a right here. But one other thing that has happened is that the state government has written back and said, no, we don't support R3 at these sites. So, for example, what's happening here with Roseville Chase is that instead of having the whole site at $29 million, and keep in mind this is March 2020 values, so it may be higher now, we're looking at potentially $11 million if it's for the whole site. And if you ask why is there such a big differential, it's because the site has quite a lot of contaminated works. Yeah, there's a lot of work required to prepare it for sale. And that's why there's such a big difference between R2 at 11 million and R3 at 29 million. Now, I've stated in the motion that there's a whole bunch of needs. There have been multiple residents who, especially under COVID and work from home, etc., they value local community space. There's a lot of residents who want their children to be able to play nearby, and the other options are on foot anyway, quite hard to access. There's also sporting groups, for example, rugby, netball, soccer, like that, hockey even, but you know, I don't think it'll fit hockey, who have expressed interest in potentially using at least part of the site. So I think with the precedent of other councils and even Ku-ring-gai at times reaching out and saying to the community, look, we've got all this land, over 10,000 square metres. At the moment, it's potentially worth 11 million sale, March 2020 prices. Yeah, it's very hard for me as a councillor to support that kind of thing. I do recognise that there is a need for local community space that is usable, that is open and flat. I do recognise that it is currently a residential area, and whatever we introduce has to be sympathetic to the needs, you know, the traffic concerns and the lighting concerns and things like that of surrounding neighbours. But I do think, as a first step, we as a council should consult with the community. And I do actually agree with Councillor Smith. I agree that tough decisions need to be made here at Ku-ring-gai Council. But I do believe that in addition to tough choices, they also need to be considered and smart as well. And if there are ways, for example, if we could say, look, half the land gets sold, do a planning proposal, recommend that as potentially R3, we may potentially get more back as a council, and yet we preserve some of the land for community recreation. So I think I do agree with Councillor Smith that tough decisions need to be made, but I also believe that we can make smart choices and put a planning proposal which we believe the state government will accept this time round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nye. Councillor Alec Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to speak in favour of the amendment. The proposal to rezone 47 Worrain Road to low-density housing would be a poor outcome for the local community and a poor outcome for Ku-ring-gai. It would be a poor outcome for the local community because there is not a usable park nearby, because this is community-owned land that could be used for a number of valuable community activities. Malga Avenue West Playground, the park supposedly 200 metres from 47 Worrain Road, is a nature strip. It runs beside a main road, Babbage Road, and is not good for parents with small children, dog owners, or any type of sporting activity. 47 Worrain Road is 10,000 square metres of land that could be used for many community activities, from a playground through to multi-use courts. But in fact, we've never actually asked the community what they would like to do with their community land. Instead, we're considering a proposal to rezone it to R2, or single dwelling houses in preparation for sale, and that is what this amendment is seeking to correct. At R2 zoning, Ku-ring-gai would yield the lowest possible multiple for the sale of residential land. If we think the circumstances are extraordinary and we desperately need to sell a community asset, let's at least identify an asset that can be zoned with higher density that can generate more funds for the Ku-ring-gai community more broadly. Rezoning and selling this community land at R2 would be a poor outcome for Ku-ring-gai and a poor outcome for the local community. I therefore urge you, Mr. Mayor, and my fellow councillors to vote in favour of Councillor Nye's motion to engage the community and reject the proposed rezoning of 47 Worrain Road, Roseville Chase. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to know if there was a community consultation done previously for this project.
Director Watson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly not of the type contemplated by Councillor Nye. There has been a number of consultations here, but they have been on the premise of rezoning for alternate residential uses.
Thank you, Director Watson. Councillor Smith.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Director Watson, could you just take us through how we came about the recommendation in regarding recycling this asset and why it came about, the reasoning behind it, and what we're trying to deliver through Ku-ring-gai?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, both the bowling clubs were active bowling clubs until a couple of years ago, and about the same time, 6-8 months apart, both bowling clubs folded and effectively turned the keys back to council. At no point in their history have these sites been available to the general public for open space. They're effectively private open space. You had to be a member of the bowling club or pay to use the greens. So they've never been available as public open space. There has always been, and this council has now received a number of briefings on the funding gap for infrastructure renewal for unfunded projects, which is in the order of just under $120 million. And these two sites, or this site and another one that will come to you in a couple of months, were always identified as surplus sites after they were given back by their respective lessees. In the first instance, Council did seek rezoning to R3, and the staff still think that would have been a better outcome, but unfortunately we got conditions effectively saying revert back to R2 and exhibit on that basis. Now, we did that, and through the process the Department of Planning changed its approach to planning proposals and effectively imposed a time limit on both the bowling club planning proposals, so both of them were seen to lapse. Now, again, we don't necessarily believe that was a reasonable or fair outcome, but regardless, we went back and re-exhibited both of the planning proposals, or sought new gateway determinations to re-exhibit both planning proposals as R2. All of the times we've reported back to Council, we had always said that we effectively reserve the right to have another attempt to rezone them at R3 later, because certainly, you know, I've been accused in the past of trying to sell off the farm. Well, I'd always said I'd quite happy to sell off the farm as long as the price was right. So the proposition put by Councillor Alec Taylor is quite right. It's not necessarily the best value for the site, but that is all that is available to us at the moment. There's no reason you can't lock in R2 and you know, have an attempt at R3 or parts of R3 later. But at the moment, there are a number of projects which are relying on income in the short term, and this is the only site that Council has available for sale in the short term. Bearing in mind that today's report is only to finalise the planning proposal, there would be a separate report to Council specifically seeking approval to dispose of the property later. So it's, this is not the last time the Council will see this, but it's certainly the last point in a fairly long rezoning process which has been going on since Minister Roberts was the Planning Minister first time round. I think that covered your wide-ranging question.
That was, yes, it was. Just if you can just indulge me a little bit more, how long has this process taken, and what has the cost been to Council and the ratepayers to get to where we are today with it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're looking at about 3.5, 4 years on both planning proposals. The bulk of that time has been unfortunately spent with the Department of Planning rather than Council. This site, the costs are running at about $170,000 to this point in time. Now, they were end of December figures, so there may be a little bit more, but between the two planning proposals, you're looking at $380,000 in costs to this point in time.
And if we were not to move forward with it, what would you foresee the impacts are on the current projects that we've been trying to move forward on? Where would you see that going financially?
That's probably through to Director Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council would need to reconsider its funding strategy for its projects and its timing for those projects, depending on whether alternate funding is available.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillors, I was speaking against this amendment. If you look at point A, it is mere commentary. We scroll down to point B. There is nothing there. Again, commentary. Point C, commentary. Point D, commentary. Point E, commentary. Point F, commentary. Point G, commentary. point H. We have something there. We have something there in point H. So A through to, guess which one? A lot of commentary. We then move to point I. First section, we're talking about consultation. I point 1, 2 and 3, again, commentary. For 2 pages of an amendment, the salient points are very, very small. A lot of it is just commentary. When it all boils down to, we have some major projects to be built. Do we want to be seen as a can-do council or as a can-don't council? I certainly want to be seen as a can-do council, that we're doing things for the wider community. So I cannot, in all good conscience, for the benefit of Ku-ring-gai residents, support this amendment. Thank you. Councillor Smith, do you have...
Thank you for the commentary, Mr Mayor. I would like to speak against Councillor Nye's motion. I appreciate...
Amendment,
sorry.
That's right. Councillor Smith.
I appreciate the fact that both Councillor Nye and Councillor Taylor are in here this evening to represent their community in Roseville. I do somewhat feel that we've been delivering very well in Roseville at the moment with some of the projects, and that I feel that Ku-ring-gai has got to be looked at a whole, not in one particular locality, and believe that we do need to move projects in areas which do require some love, to put it nicely. So I can't support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Is there any further speakers on this matter? There being none, I will put Councillor Nye's amendment. All those in favour? Councillor Spencer, Councillor Kay, Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Nye. Those against? Councillor Greg Taylor. Those against? Councillors Wheatley, Councillor Ward, Councillor Smith, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Pettit. The votes being tied at 5-5. I use my casting vote against the amendment. The amendment is lost. Councillors, we now move back to the motion, which was moved by Councillor Smith, and we need to vote on that. All those in favour of the original motion? Councillors Wheatley, Councillors Ward, Councillor Smith, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Pettit. Against? Councillor Spencer, Councillor Kay, Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Nye. That being 5-5, I vote in favour of the motion. That motion is carried. We now move to NM1. Sorry. Hold on.
So you've got an amendment to NM1, so are you going to allow him to move it first and then move yours as an amendment? Is that what you're doing?
Well, he actually has to move it, doesn't he?
Yeah. Do you want to do extra reports first?
We'll just do extra reports first, circulated to the meeting.
There are none, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, General Manager. Jumped the gun a little bit quick there, councillors. Move to NM1, Councillor Nye's motion. Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the motion as printed.
Seconder for that? Councillor Kay. Councillor Nye, you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, thanks. I believe that the prayer of the motion adequately covers all that I've got to say. Or actually, something to add. There is flexibility, however. We are asking council staff to review the policy to recommend other changes that are necessary. We haven't really strongly steered them in any particular direction. It's up to their discretion and up to their knowledge of what the practices are in our surrounding councils. There is going to be a much better opportunity in the next 1 or 2 or 3 months' time to review the draft policy that the council staff have put together for us. And at that point in time, I believe that if we have, over the last 2-3 months, considered any concerns or anything like that, we could correct that in this meeting in March, April or May before we put it out to public for public consultation. I would like to add that if anyone has a concern about this motion, please reach out. We could potentially even incorporate the change, but this motion basically is to seek more of a two-way dialogue in our public forum meetings, which I note, by the way, have not really been occurring the way that they normally do pre-COVID. But once COVID is, I'm not sure if it will ever be over, but once the pandemic is toned down a bit and we can meet in person regularly, I have received a lot of emails from residents, even people from Ku-ring-gai Views, who are quite keen to see this happen. Thank you.
Councillor Kay as seconder.
I reserve my right, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to put forward an alternate motion.
So you're moving an amendment?
I'll move an amendment, please.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Second.
Do staff have that on board? Councillors, I'll let you digest Councillor Smith's amendment, which is fairly simple, point A and B. Councillor Smith, you will need a seconder for that. Seconded, Councillor Lennon. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I was pretty in support of Councillor Nye's motion that he put forward, but I just believe that we needed to tighten the framework around some of the points, which I have, and I'm quite happy to get the staff's involvement in this to speak to this as well. But I think the main part about it was that we just wanted to sort of tighten the process, make it a little bit clearer for all. It's pretty much, it's close enough to Councillor Nye's motion, but we've just sort of restricted some of the time periods and moving forward more with what the code of meeting practice is, which I believe the staff are already in the process of already doing. So it is a requirement from council to actually put this forward, and I believe this, what I'll put forward is much more in the spirit of what is required. So I'll put that forward to the councillors this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Lennon has seconded. Do you wish to speak at this point in time?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would just like to add that this does pick up the spirit of Councillor Nye's excellent motion. It simply seeks to take the same concept in a way that is perhaps a bit clearer to follow and a bit better to implement in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lennon. Councillor Alec Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I also agree with Councillor Smith's amendment. I think it's good to push this through a little faster and harder and tighter. And just actually have a question for Councillor Smith. What is your view on section 4.18 regarding the General Manager's ability to address the Council for up to 1 minute? And did you consider including that also in your amendment?
I wouldn't mind just asking the staff, Mr Mayor, through you to the staff, just in relation to the question on there. I don't foresee a real issue in that in. Could I just
Thank
get
you,
some
Councillor
feedback?
Smith. General Manager.
Through you, Mr Mayor, councillors. In relation to section 4.18, I don't think the climate of a public forum is conducive to staff toing and froing with speakers. to points raised on the spur of the moment. There's always a gap between the public forum and council, and it's always been our preference that if there are some detailed questions or points raised by a speaker, we go back to the staff and actually put a response in writing to the councillors before the council meeting, because it's to inform the councillors, not necessarily the public, because the councillors are the ones making the decisions. So I think it's far better. I always have the right, obviously, to make a personal explanation or if I think staff have been defamed in a public forum, and I've always had that right. But in terms of actually directly responding to questions raised by the public on the spot, I don't think that's an appropriate thing.
Thank you. I won't be accommodating that.
Councillor Nye.
Just a quick question. Is it technically possible for me to incorporate all of Councillor Smith's proposed changes in the amendment into the original motion? Or what are the rules around that?
I don't think so.
Has to go on public exhibition anyway.
Councillor Nye, it might be just easy if you withdraw yours.
Okay, yeah, sure. Let's actually, it makes no difference. Let's just vote on the amendment, which I support, by the way.
That's all right. Thank you, Councillor Nye. Councillor Kay?
I've just got a question for Councillor Smith. Would you maybe consider the 1 minute to 2? I just feel 1 minute to answer and respond to a question, sometimes a little bit short. I mean, it doesn't mean they need to use the 2 minutes, but a 2 minute maximum. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. I did look at that, and I actually did have quite a number of discussions with that. I'm actually very comfortable with the 1 minute as it is, but appreciate your input. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. There be no further debate on this matter. We'll put Councillor Smith's amendment. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Councillors, that amendment now becomes the motion, which we have to vote on. We now vote on the motion. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Councillors, we move to NM2, which is Councillor Greg Taylor's motion. And before you commence with that, Councillor Spencer does have to retire to the ante-room. Councillor Taylor, please proceed.
So I've modified the notice of motion. If we can have that up there, please.
If council staff would bring up the new motion on behalf of Councillor Greg Taylor. And I'll just let councillors digest that. So, Councillor Taylor, you're moving that motion, and I require a seconder. Seconder, Councillor Alec Taylor. Councillor Greg Taylor.
So when I first viewed the documents written there, the final design and the review of environmental factors with staff, they seemed particularly inadequate. Particularly the review of environmental factors. It was a draft. It wasn't a final document, and the resulting design had very little runoff, cork infield runoff mitigation features in the design, and it seemed that there was a potential for the environment to be damaged or at least impacted by what was in that draft design. So this motion seeks to make sure that the final review of environmental factors and the final design reflect design that mitigates all of the environmental concerns. With the project, I might just highlight that recently in the media there has been issues with synthetic turf fields throughout Sydney. The council is being sued for their synthetic turf pitch in Bayside Council, and also Lane Cove Council has recently quashed their synthetic turf project. Surrounding the Norman Griffiths Oval there is stiff forest, the Sydney Turpentine Ironbark Forest. It is critically endangered. There has also been a sighting of a black-hooded sun orchid on the site there as well, that is also critically endangered. The site, Norman Griffiths Oval, also drains into Quarry Creek. Quarry Creek runs through the whole of Bicentennial, Ku-ring-gai Bicentennial Park there, and then flows into National Park area there. I've spent a lot of time over lockdown, in particular, exploring these areas. I know that the Quarry Creek site, when it meets the National Park there, has been a bush regeneration site for the last 30 years. Council has actually paid for contractors to come in and remove weeds and restore the area. It looks fantastic there. And from what I've found from my explorations through lockdown, it's the only example of what a creek system should look like in this area. All of the rest, you can't walk through it. There's weeds everywhere. There's introduced species there. Animals can't access these areas. Humans certainly can't. No birds sort of flying through. And it would be a terrible shame if this project did impact negatively on that beautiful setting there. I added C and D recently, just because I felt that I didn't want the hybrid and the natural turf options to be overlooked for future resurfacing projects. I was showed a quotation that for a similar price to this project is costing, we could get three natural turf fields, best practice natural turf fields, installed throughout the Commonara Ward or anywhere in Ku-ring-gai for the same price, but that price also includes 20 years of external maintenance contracting as well. So this project is extremely expensive, and I'm trying to suggest that we need to be looking at more options so that so we're spending ratepayers' money as best we can. Finally, I'd just like to say that I feel it's our actually no, two things. This contract was signed in the last term, but it's being constructed in this term, and if there are adverse ramifications to the environment because of this construction, it will look bad on us this current term. And finally, I mean, with every development that we do, with every anything that's constructed in the Ku-ring-gai area, it's just important that we make sure that it doesn't have ramifications on the environment or the wildlife or the residents or anything like that. And by this motion, I'm just trying to make sure that we completely understand what could happen with this project. Sorry, what could happen if this project isn't assessed from an environmental perspective correctly, and so yeah, I hope we can all see that this is important to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Alec Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to speak in favour of Councillor Greg Taylor's motion. This is a motion with no downside. It will increase transparency for the community, it will improve confidence in environmental risk mitigation, and it will not delay delivery of this important and highly desired facility for the community. I urge my fellow councillors to vote in favour of the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, could I ask one of the directors to give us a little bit of an update of some of the issues that Councillor Taylor has talked about in relation to studies being done, environmental issues, if they have been addressed?
Director Banasif.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the current status is the project is being in the process of being detailed designed. Once the detailed design is complete, the complete documentation is sent across to an independent consultant for an REF assessment, a review of environmental factors, to ensure that the final design, to ensure that all mitigating measures, environmental mitigating measures, have been addressed within the final design. With regards to mitigating cork into the waterways, there is a proposal to have a 200mm high concrete hob around the entire field to retain the cork on the field. It's proposed to have shoe cleaning grates at the entry and exit points onto the field. There'll be a series of absorption pits on the southeastern side of the field prior to a bioswale being constructed, and the bioswale will be on the south side of the field, as well as mesh nets installed in all piped pits that are located around the field.
Councillor Ward, any further questions?
No.
Thank you. Councillor Smith? Oh, Councillor Kay, sorry.
Okay, my question is through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll do George Manasseh first because I can continue on from what you said. Do you have an indication of obviously the REF is a process, do we have a time frame of completion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think when you talk about completion, that's the design, completion of the design. At this stage, it's the end of March, April / beginning of April. There has been slight delays, obviously impacting by COVID and impacting on the design on the staff. But hopefully, if there are no further delays, it's around the early April, end of March.
Okay, thank you. Now, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Watson. Director Watson, would there be any concerns with any of these documents being made public and placed on the council website?
Director Watson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I would have thought that was a question best directed to the director doing the project, but I see no reason with any of these why they shouldn't be made public, no.
Is this standard that moving forward, is this something we could do on all projects of this sort?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's my understanding
Transparency?
that some of the changes being considered by the Department of Planning in relation to projects that require a review of environmental factors is that these documents at various points of time would all be lodged through the planning portal for all New South Wales councils. Now, if after these documents had been signed, somebody sought access to them through GIPA, I would have thought we would have given advance access to these documents without going through GIPA. It's very rare that we get asked for them. Once they're completed and signed, we wouldn't be trying to hide them, no.
Yeah, no, I'm just aware that some councils do automatically put that on their website. Just think moving forward that would be fair for transparency.
I would say there's no reason we can't do that. I think councillors may be surprised how many we actually do, as well as planning impact assessments. There would be 40 or so a year, I would have thought, at least, if not more. At least.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Smith?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Director Banasif. You've answered one of the questions in relation to at what stage would the final REF be available. So I can see that's coming up quite fast. I suppose there's just been a question around what the process is, whether or not council at the moment is doing it wrong or right. I suppose I'm very interested in the fact I was actually one of the previous councillors that has supported this, which was a unanimous decision with all councillors here this evening. So if you can just indulge me a little bit on these questions. Director Banasif, who will review the final ref?
Director Banasif.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my operational staff will review the final REF in conjunction with the staff from the strategy environment team to ensure that all mitigating measures and statutory requirements are met.
Will the ref address all the statutory environmental issues?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes.
Are these officers qualified or experienced to review such documents?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, they are.
Can you please provide me an example of a project where a ref was developed, where a project was significantly impacting on the environment that we've done in here in Ku-ring-gai?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the St. Ives Regional Playground, an REF was developed for the playground. The playground impacted on, I believe, there were Duffy Forest, there were heritage and cultural issues, there was stormwater runoff issues, there was bushfire risk and other erosion matters that needed to be addressed.
So, just with what you've described, it sounds like there was a lot more complex than what you're currently dealing with at the moment. Would that be fair to say?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, correct.
The mitigation, I wanted to discuss that, but I think you've actually addressed that with Councillor Kay. I think the next thing is again, and I appreciate the fact that Councillor Taylor, Greg Taylor, has brought this up, but I just want to make sure, with my discussions with Councillor Taylor, I did actually encourage him to have discussions with you in regarding the process. Was this made available, this information, to Councillor Taylor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe you're referring to the process of reaching a final REF?
Correct.
Yes, it was.
Thank you. How accurate can you forecast the cost of maintenance on a synthetic field over a 40-year life cycle? I've come to this matter, I really think, I think one of the ones that was just raised here this evening is that we've got 3 fields that Councillor Taylor has suggested that there's 3 fields that we could get for the same price as one synthetic. So I just want to understand that Council sort of is addressing this, looking at the cost, looking at the best fit purpose on this. Could you answer that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the maintenance costs over the assets first use for life can be calculated quite accurately. There will be too many variables to calculate any costs beyond the first use for life, that being the remaining 25 thereabouts years.
Just one final question to you. Have you ever delivered this type of project for a council?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I've delivered the design and construction of 2 synthetic fields for my previous employer, one of those fields being cork and the other field being rubber infill.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Banasif. Director Watson, you have some further commentary?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in relation to the second last question, which related to effectively reallocation of the funds to other projects, I think we've got to bear in mind that roughly $1 million of this money is grant money to the clubs. That was specifically, I understand, for a synthetic field, and council's funds are also for a synthetic field, and they're not necessarily available for redistribution for turf, effectively maintenance or replacement. They were for new facilities that increased the use and utility of a site. And in the case of the last reallocation of funds for this project, in fact came out of the Section 712 plan, and it was money attached to the upgrade of Selkirk Park. So it may be that some of that money, frankly, should go back to Selkirk Park rather than to other upgrades in Commonara Ward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to speak in support of Councillor Greg Taylor's motion, but just to start, I'd like to say that if you look through the minutes of the last council term, I have always been supportive of having a synthetic surface at Norman Griffiths. Even when we were discussing whether or not to have synthetics at Mimosa, I was one of the councillors pushing for it to be relocated back to the original place, which was at Norman Griffiths. I do believe that it may provide an improvement in the lifestyle and the usability and the health and enjoyment of many of our residents. Having said that, I am very, very supportive of Councillor Greg Taylor's motion here. I do believe that by making the review of environmental factors and number of associated documents available to the public, it gives members of the public, especially those who have concerns about what may be happening in the future, a lot more assurance that things will be under control, things will go according to, that the environment won't be too adversely impacted. Now, if this review of environmental factors says something that's contrary, for example, that there may be a particular negative externality here or there, it also gives us as a council a little bit of an opportunity to just improve our controls. So, for example, if there are concerns of cork running off, then perhaps we can improve the filtration of that. So it gives a lot of assurance for our residents, and it also gives us the opportunity to improve our controls. And I also like point C? I do like point C because it says, look, maybe there are natural surf or hybrid solutions in the future for other locations that may potentially give us a good outcome, or maybe even a better outcome for our residents at a similar cost or lower. I do believe that we as a council should be open to asking all sorts of questions and keep our minds open. I'm not going to lock myself down to one solution only. And I generally encourage and am encouraged by all 10 councillors here that we've taken the spirit of asking questions. If we're not comfortable with something, especially something that's happened in the previous term, we've felt comfortable raising those concerns and having them challenged and discussed and debated in a healthy manner, as we have seen tonight. And that also applies to the next NM as well. So I will throw my support behind this. Just as another comment, I am somewhat disappointed at some of the emails that we've received as councillors. Some of them have been relatively emotional, maybe a good emotional, but misinformed. It is kind of, I'd like to support councillors however they can, but it does make our job much more difficult if there are a lot of emails that don't quite hit the mark, that may misrepresent the original intent of a motion. I just feel that as a councillor, it's not a pleasant thing, and if it had been me, I would have been quite upset. But overall, I do support the right for all councillors to ask healthy questions. If councillors ask questions, I'm most likely going to support it. And in this case, where it's about providing more clarity on environmental factors, making it available to the public, having assurance that what we will do won't adversely impact the environment in an unintended way, I'm all for it. So I would recommend all councillors to support Councillor Greg Taylor's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nye. Councillors, I'd like to move an amendment. And the amendment is point A from Councillor Taylor's motion. from his new motion, not the original one as printed. Councillors, that's the amendment, and I seek a seconder. Seconded Councillor Smith. Councillors, this amendment is very simple. It just takes point A, which is all the documentation that we're putting out for the general public. Very simple, very straightforward. We're putting the final review of the ref out for public to view, the final design, revised delivery schedule for the project. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing complicated. In the original motion, we had looking at various hybrid options. Points C and D, we had a little bit of confusion there. What do you do with a synthetic hockey field upgrade? There are no other options, are there? Unless you want to turn that synthetic hockey field into a grass field. Don't think the hockey players would be too happy with that. They love playing on synthetic. So I'm confining this amendment to Norman Griffiths, this particular site. Obviously we want to put out more transparency. We're going to do that with this amendment. It's clear, precise. We're not hypothesising about various other locations which may or may not eventuate. Would it be in this council term? Who knows? What location? Don't know yet. Where would it be? Don't know. Councillors, we will deal with those locations if and when they come up. We want to give the community clarity on what's being done here at Norman Griffiths. We will give clarity at other locations when they come along and if they come along. So, councillors, let's keep it simple. I would encourage you to support this amendment. Councillor Smith has seconded. Would you like to speak to that?
Mr Mayor, I'll make it short. I've been speaking enough this evening. I think everybody's had enough. I'm very much in support. It's just very clear. And as I was alluding to there before, that I'm very confident in the way that we've got our staff that are working on these projects and what they're delivering. I don't believe that we've ever got one wrong, and that the more clear and concise that we can make this for everybody would be fantastic. And the other thing that I think that we've just got to sort of get the message, there's Ku-ring-gai Council can't be said that we're just all about synthetic. That's not the case at all. We're looking at the council staff, when it's put up in front of them, they look at things on their own merits. They're trying to juggle what we're trying to deliver on projects, on sports, and I believe that this will be a good outcome for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillors, there be no further speakers on that. I will put the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? Councillors Wheatley, Ward, Smith, Lennon, Pettit. Those against? Councillors Kay, Councillors Alec Taylor, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Sam Nye. That's 5-4. We now have to put the amendment now becomes the motion. All those in favour of the motion? Councillors Wheatley, Ward, Smith, Lennon, Pettit and Nye. Against? Councillors Kay, Councillors Alec Taylor, Councillor Greg Taylor. The motion is carried. Councillors, you just indulge us for a moment to get Councillor Spencer back in. Thank you, Councillor Spencer. We did take a large amount of time, but good to see you back. Councillors, we move on to NM3, Marion Street Theatre. Moved a motion by Councillors Lennon and Ward. Councillor Lennon.
Yes, do I speak to the motion at the moment, Mr Mayor? Or is it-
Just move it if there are any
Yes, I'll
minor
move it.
details or any changes that you might have within that motion.
Move it as printed, please, Mr Mayor.
I'm quite happy to move it as printed. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Ward. Councillor Lennon, I might just suggest a minor change, that council suspend for a maximum of 3 months rather than exactly 3 months, if you might want to incorporate that minor word addition.
As you wish, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lennon. So that becomes that council suspend for a maximum of 3 months. Councillor Lennon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I had thought that my first motion on Marion Street Theatre would be to sail on very quickly. There's been a lot of wonderful work done by council staff, by the Save Marion Street Theatre Committee, by architects, by many others for many, many years to produce an extremely exciting project. Until about a month ago, when Councillor Ward and I met with some local residents and some members of the Save Marion Street Theatre Committee. And they presented some ideas for this particular design of this building that we believe are worthy of consideration. And it's worth keeping in mind that Marion Street Theatre will become something of which this municipality and the city will be very proud. And once it's built, it's going to be there for generations to come. So if we're going to get the design right, this is the time to do it. And it's with great reluctance, even a heavy heart, that I pull myself back from the bit and suggest that we hold back for 3 months to allow the work and the ideas coming from these philanthropists and experts in theatre, management and operation to develop with members of the Save Main Street Theatre Committee and put together something that they and we, through the committee, can then bring to council staff and council architects and councillors for consideration to take a project that is excellent, but to make it even better. Because again, I say this is the point in the project where we need to get the design as good as it can be, to take something that is excellent and make it a little bit better. Because in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, we won't be revisiting the design then. So as I say, with a heavy heart, I ask us to pause for 3 months to consider this work. And let me add to the philanthropists behind this, and that's a good word for them, are funding this work. They're willing to put their hands into their pockets, so there will be no cost to council while this work is done, to produce ideas to then bring before council staff, to work with council staff, to work with architects and to work with council together to make this exciting project even better. So I commend the motion to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lennon. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The maximum term with time we're looking for is 3 months, and this will help the wider community involvement. We expect to bring before the council, and if staff agree, then councillors design ideas to maximise revenue, minimise operating cost per theatre goers. Ideas under consideration will include a backstage room, increasing theatre capacity, increasing natural light even more so, greater knocking down of the existing building and rebuilding fire hazards. I also want us to widen the community involvement beyond the theatre. I am thinking in terms of something like the Marion Street Theatre and Cultural Centre. Earning money by revenue hiring and Cultural Centre could host birthdays, small weddings, cabaret, music recycle, children's theatre, dance, art displays, cultural events such as Lunar New Year, Diwali and Christmas, other events for the Chinese, Indian and other communities, and an all-day coffee shop. This reflects the reality of the changing social environment now clearly resident in Ku-ring-gai. Thus, the flexibility of the revived Marion Street Theatre should attract and provide facilities that match those trends. This will augment the support and viability of any final proposed
proposal provided it reaches out to its diversity and their needs in how it will be built. This will be launched as a diverse, vibrant and inclusive place that will increase participation and deliver both social and economic benefits to everyone. It can be a model development which engages with reality today and tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Kay.
Okay, I've got some questions through you, Mr Mayor, to the relevant director. It may be Director Watson. Now, in relation to the Save Marion Street Committee, can you confirm with me how many times they met overall? I'll give you a couple of questions if that's okay. How long this committee's been going? Why was the committee created and the purpose? Do you believe that this was a productive committee? Was design discussed at that committee at any time, or were there any objections? Thank you. Sorry, it was a bit loaded.
Absolutely, Director Watson.
Can't tell the exact number of times the committee met, but the committee was in place for a number of years. The committee had a number of independent people with expertise in theatre managers, people from production background, and 2 members from the Save Marion Street Theatre Committee. There were a number of occasions where Save Marion Street Theatre Committee in particular had direct access to the project architects. There was a number, I mean, the meetings were all about design. They were all about the concept. For those, most of you will be familiar with the site if you haven't attended theatre there in the past. It's a fairly constrained site. When it was first built, it would have had 2 or 3 neighbours. These days, the number of neighbours is in the scores. There's apartment blocks surrounding on the sides and back. So it wasn't a very easy site to design to, and there was certainly not insignificant budget constraints. We have all of the potential uses that Councillor Ward just alluded to. They're all possible within that the building. There's 7 different spaces. There's an all-day cafe. There's spaces where people can take varying spaces of different size and quality. It's fair to say that there are a number of theatres on the North Shore. Some of them are quite close to us. So what we were looking for was something that could be a little bit different. There's no good going and competing with the Concourse. It's no good competing with the Zenith Theatre, and it's certainly no good competing with the theatre over at Belrose. All of those have, different purposes, different sizes, different capacities and functions. And that said, there's a number of theatres, in town and down at Kirribilli, which also have different. So it was about getting a unique offering, and we think we've done that. The Save Marion Street Theatre Committee has, to be fair to them, always wanted a bigger theatre, and our theatre consultants made it very clear, and we had a very big consulting team. You only saw two of the consultants, or the architect and one of the consultants last week. But I mean, these are people who have done quite significant theatre upgrades and redevelopments all over Sydney, so they know their stuff. The Save Marion Street Theatre Committee has addressed this council. They have addressed the former mayor, the mayor before that, and the SNPP, and on a number of occasions they have said this is a good project, get on and do it. So for us, at the very last moment, because it is the very last moment, we have been through a long design and documentation process. We've been through I don't know what it was, 13, 15-month DA approval process, where again we had to respond to some quite tricky things, largely around acoustics because of the proximity of the neighbours. We are literally a couple of months from completing the final set of documents that could go to tender. So any significant change could possibly see this project turn back 3 years. So it's a little bit disappointing for these things to be raised now, particularly when we're talking about more extensive demolition of the existing theatre. You know, part of the difficulty with this site is because the community wanted us to keep as much of the existing theatre as possible. It would have been easier to knock it down and start again, and it might have even been cheaper. You know, there's, you know, we purposely have kept the theatre at 249 seats, the main auditorium, because as soon as you go to 250, you require more toilets, more car parking, more this, more that. So we think we have struck the balance right. We don't think we have compromised the design or the offering in doing that. And, you know, as of today, or as of yesterday, we're at 70% documentation on the final documentation package. So we're literally 2 months off, 2 or 3 months off. You know, this project, should this motion not get up tonight, this project would be finished before the end of financial year. So it is a little late in the process to be effectively going back and reconsulting with a lot of people who have been consulted with quite significantly over the last 4 or 5 years.
So I'd be right to just confirm that you're basically saying if we do delay this for another 3 months, we more than likely will not see delivery of this project in this term?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I got asked a number of questions today by some councillors, and it was fairly clear to me that until today they didn't realise that the project wasn't funded for construction in the next financial year. The biggest question for this council to deal with is whether or not they want to fund the capital upgrade. And if that decision was made and reflected in next year's budget, and the Director of Operations has given council through a couple of briefings recently a number of options where it could be funded, this project could be out to tender with a contractor awarded by the end of the year, and could technically be delivered in even though it's a short term, the short term of this council.
Okay, I've got another question, but that is through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Lennon. You spoke about this wouldn't cost the council anything because philanthropists were footing the bill. Do we have something in writing to that effect? So, excuse the hesitancy, but you know, people always say they're going to pay for things, and then I know council ends up footing the bill. So, would you mind expanding on what we do have?
I commend you for your hesitancy. It's very wise. No, there's nothing in writing to my knowledge, unless Councillor Ward has seen something. We simply have...
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it isn't in writing. However, the person who has come forward, I have the utmost trust in him to deliver. I'm sure he'd be willing to give us a piece of paper if that is what was required, Councillor Kay.
So, Councillor, I'll just jump on top of that one. So you've virtually got a verbal go-ahead, shall we say. Okay, well that's... And obviously you can vouch for this person and are very comfortable with them. Councillor Kay, any further questions?
No, thank you.
That's all right, Councillor Kay. Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to speak in support of this motion. As I said previously, I'm very supportive of any new councillor or old councillor challenging assumptions, asking whether things make sense, seeing if there's a better way of doing things. From what I can tell in this motion, we have 2 ward councillors who believe that there may potentially be a better way of doing things, and I am generally supportive of exploring that. Now, it may well be that if this motion were to go through and after 3 months, that members of the community, after having more detailed discussions with the architects and planners and everything, they think, oh, the current design is fantastic. And I personally believe that the current design and plans are fantastic. But we don't know until this more extensive consultation has taken place. As a generalisation, I'd like to say that I've spoken to a number of members of the community who have participated in various council advisory committees in the past, and sometimes in the past they feel like that committee is just being run as a checkbox, like a tick box kind of exercise, rather than a genuine, this is how they feel, by the way, as a genuine attempt at making things even better by seeking wide, diverse input. And I personally believe that that may be part of the reason why there may be some members of the community who feel like they might not have been as thoroughly consulted as they could have been, or feel like they haven't been heard. I'm generally supportive of this motion. 3 months, it's a bit on the long end, but it does say maximum, so it could be shorter. But I am quite supportive of assumptions being challenged. It may well be that we end up delivering on what we have right now while we firm up the funding anyway. And so I would just like to congratulate the ward councillors on working on this. And it's to me, it's just healthy activity. It's healthy signs that we have councillors who are doing their best to represent their community, not just in their ward, but all across Ku-ring-gai. So I commend this motion to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knight. Councillor Greg Taylor.
Just quickly, I'd like to add that the designers of this project have designed a number of halls within Australia that I've performed in, and they're all world-class halls. And after the design briefing we had last week, I was extremely excited by the quality of the design and how it meshed with the uniqueness of Ku-ring-gai. They even had an amphitheatre immersed in Sydney Bluegum High Forest. So I was very impressed in that. I did liaise with some community members as well, and they were concerned that the building, the venue might be a drain into the future on council funding, and that council may choose not to fund them as much as they would initially, and that they wanted to add something else, perhaps some practice rooms or something like that, that a music school could be started there or something to try and get more funding generated from the venue. Though I think that 3 months is an adequate time to explore other options if it's needed.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
A couple of questions, please.
Indeed.
So, firstly, it is to through you to Director Watson. There were 2 meetings conducted towards the end of it last year with the Marion Street Support Marion Street Committee. Did they raise any issues in relation to the proposed design, or whether did they suggest any potential new designs?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the most recent of those meetings was in fact a meeting that was convened by then Mayor Cedric Spencer. And in fact, the Save Marion Street Theatre Committee was very favourable towards the project and basically said we should be getting on and building it. So at that meeting there was no suggestion they were unhappy with the design at all. No. There has been a number of emails where, to be fair to John Townend, and I see he's not in the gallery to defend himself, he has always wanted a bigger theatre, but it was always made clear to him why we had landed on 249 seats and the mix of spaces that can be used for other uses. So I mean, I've not heard anything tonight that says the mix of spaces we've got isn't compatible with all the uses that people are talking about. You know, it was a very broad membership on that committee. There was people from non-traditional backgrounds that we would consult with. There was a lot of people with theatre expertise. So I think we've drawn in some good expertise. In terms of some of the things the 2 ward councillors said, I saw perhaps a contradiction between what was said and what is written here, because nowhere in this does it was suggested, I thought I could have heard it wrong, that the community would work with the architects. Well, the architects have been laid off for 3 months and the staff aren't touching it for 3 months. So there isn't contact between the staff and the building designers if this motion gets up as worded. The staff are off the tools, the consultants are off the tools. So I thought that was a bit of a contradiction, and perhaps I was wrong in the way I understood what was put.
So, prior to that meeting to which you referred, there was another meeting before that. I believe it was convened by former Mayor Anderson, where Ward Councillor Chateau was a council member of that committee as well. So same questions. Did they raise any, I'm referring to the Safe Marion Street Committee, did they raise any issues with regards to the proposed design, or did they suggest a new design or a bigger theatre? Through you.
Mr.
Through you,
Watson?
Mr. Mayor, I don't recall being at that meeting. I don't think I was there.
Director Bevan?
Mr. Mayor and councillors, you are testing my memory now. I did have, when I heard of this this motion that was coming up tonight, I did have to go to Director Watson and say, I don't understand. I thought we had made progress, and I thought we were doing the best we could, and I thought things had been explained carefully with the Support Marion Street Theatre people. This has come as a bit of a surprise to me as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Spencer?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, what would be the holding costs for 3 months if the work was to be suspended?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the architects have been contracted to do a package of work. They would have scheduled their sub-consultants and their own staff on the basis of wrapping this project up within a couple of months. There will be a penalty. I don't know what that is till I go and talk to them. The biggest risk would be that they pick up other work in the meantime, and they're not ready to redeploy in the maximum of 3 months covered by this notice of motion. They will go to other jobs that are on the books, and they may or may not be available to come back, at council's whim. They will pick up, other jobs. The sub-consultants will disappear to work on other consulting teams and consulting projects. I could be overstating that, I don't know, because we haven't put it to them for obvious reasons, but we have a contract, and they're meeting that schedule, and that schedule is, due to finish in a couple of months.
Councillor Spencer, does that help answer your question? I think there are probably certain clauses within the contract. It may well be a fixed dollar value and a fixed time frame, so I think Director Watson might need to take that on notice to provide further information.
This might be a question to the General Manager, through you. Now, I believe the Code of Conduct states that if it is not costed, then we cannot proceed with the motion. Is that correct? At this stage, because we don't have unless we have an idea of the holding costs and the penalty and so on.
General Manager?
Mr. Mayor and councillors, it's not correct to say that it's unlawful to proceed, but if there is a resolution with a budget implication, that would need to be addressed at the next quarterly review. That can't be left unfunded indefinitely.
Councillor Spencer?
Thank you. Just a couple more questions. So this is through you to Director Watson. In that meeting which I convened, I believe it was in October or so, we did ask Mr. John Townend about crowdfunding, if you could recall. He did say that there was some, I wouldn't use the word philanthropist, but there are a few generous people that would chip in money. Do you recall that conversation or that question that I asked?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do recall that question, though it was, as you say, or as you suggest, effectively a throwaway line, and there was people out there who would contribute.
That's right.
It's fair to say, and I don't think you were at the briefing. I think it was on the 31st of January, the all-day briefing. But I did can't remember, it was that briefing or the specific briefing on Marion Street last week. I did say that we had been approached by a philanthropist through the very late in the project, and we did have a number of meetings with that person and his representative, and the amount of money, and again it wasn't in writing, but the amount of money that was put on the table was nowhere near the cost of the work that was required to attract the donation. And I don't even know that it's the same person. But that person wanted, for example, a 3-storey above-ground car park at the back of the theatre with a stage on the top deck. And my response was, well, I'm having enough trouble dealing with acoustic issues inside the building. How am I going to deal with them on the top floor of an open car park 10 feet from the neighbour's window? Now, we did make the offer that this person could, or in fact, I'll rephrase that. This person went direct to our architects because he knew one of the architects and requested a briefing. And so the architects come back to us and said, well, we were quite happy for that person to have a chat with one of the partners of the architecture firm. Now that meeting never occurred because that individual decided not to take up that opportunity. But as I say, it was for some quite significant work that were well beyond the terms of, the sum, and it was fairly loosely thrown around, but we did have a rough idea of what it would cost to do a 3-level above-ground car park with a stage. And frankly, I put it to them that I didn't think I could actually get approval for that in the location of Selkirk Park and given the neighbours.
Councillor Spencer, more questions?
Yes. Just
Fire
last
away.
couple of questions. Probably the last one. Thank you. Now, I believe we are currently talking about a budget of about 19-20 million, thereabouts, to round up, to refurbish this theatre. Am I correct? Is the ballpark correct?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that, Councillor Spencer, that was the figure that we had a couple of years ago. That includes the money that's been spent to date on design. But what I did allude to in that last briefing was that at the present time, construction costs are running well ahead of what Council is including in its long-term financial plan. We're expecting cost escalation over the last year and a half and going forward of somewhere between 8 and 15%. I did also say at that last briefing that we have in fact commissioned, based on the work as it was at 70% yesterday, a final or an up-to-date quantity surveyor's report, and that would take into account the current cost of construction and the final set of plans. There would have been some changes required to the plans as a consequence of conditions of development consent, for example. Some of those things wouldn't have been included necessarily in our first cost estimate, or we had multiple cost estimates, but the most recent cost estimate. One thing we had to do is, because of the extent of the new build, again, for example, we had to make the building earthquake-proof. Now, that's quite a reasonable condition, but not something we costed in our original schedule of work. So I would expect that I'd be very surprised if when we get a updated QS report back, that it's still sitting at 19 million. I would think it's substantially higher, with at least 15% per year built on top of that.
And just to clarify, you're referring to the present design. So with a new design, a bigger design, it would, it's fair to say that it would cost substantially more than that.
Depending on what the committee reported back to Council in 3 months' time, it may be that it can't be done within the scope of the existing planning approval. And you may be looking at a substantial modification or a fresh development application, which is between documentation and consideration is 18 months, 2 years at the very, very least. As well as, so far I think we're into this for about $1.2 million in design and documentation. So you'd certainly add to those costs.
Well, he actually answered another question that I had, which is about the development application. So Ned, of course, you said earlier that for the present design, it is not funded. So if we, it is not funded, if we then go out and look for a bigger theatre, I mean, we don't have the funds for the smaller one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Councillor Ward, do you have further questions, as you've already spoken to this particular item? So you need to ask questions.
Look, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. I have to say that I am just as surprised as
Councillor Ward, it needs to be a question rather than a
well,
statement.
I'll lead to that. My question is the reason that, well, I have to make a statement before I can ask a question. The reason we're here today with this motion is because we were asked by the Marion Street Theatre and the community to have a look at this. So I'm a little bit perplexed as to what's happened here, because I'm hearing conflicting messages from the
Sorry,
staff.
point of order, it's a question.
So my question is that, did we have a meeting with the committee, that is the staff, and did the committee express their displeasure or concerns about the designs of the theatre?
Director Watson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Before the development application was lodged, the reference committee, including the two members of the Save Marion Street Theatre Committee and the council, were all fully briefed by the architects, and everybody knew exactly what was being lodged, and nobody raised any objections to the plans being lodged exactly as they were presented in those final meetings.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Councillor Ward, unless you had further questions at this point in time, I'll go to Councillor Smith.
Mr. Mayor, through you, I think a lot of this discussion point is around philanthropists. What I think, if I could ask the Director, would it be possible if Councillor Ward wrote down the philanthropist's name and gave it to you just to see if we are speaking about the same person on this matter to assist, rather than naming him, if we could just do it in...
Director Watson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm reasonably confident it's the same person because I understand that it was Councillor Ward in a former life that opened up communications through the mayor, second mayor prior, opened up those communication lines. So I have no doubt that we're talking about the same person. And I don't want to name anybody because in other cases there would be a non-disclosure agreement about any arrangements that will come to. So given that it's an offer that it didn't proceed, I'm even less inclined to talk about what was said.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Smith? No further. Councillors, why through the maximum minute is to encourage that we get it done within less than 90 days. We're putting it back onto those that moved the motion and the Save Marion Street Theatre to come up with their amended designs. Obviously, we're looking at tweaking rather than redoing. We're getting close to it. We've got a pretty good design, and I think the whole idea of this particular motion is to make sure that we have got the best design. Given the constraints of 249, we know that we're not going over that. We're not looking at going anything bigger, better, where it would actually cause the project to stall in a major way. If this comes back within 60 days, excellent. We also have the situation where we might have some, for want of better words, liquidated damages due to a bit of delay with the architects. So not only do we want this to be cost neutral, this 60 to 90 days, potentially, and I'll leave that up to the ward councillors, that it may cost council some penalties with our architects. So potentially you need to talk to those benefactors, whether they are looking to cover those potential losses to council. And I will leave that with the ward councillors to discuss further elsewhere. Certainly with the design that has been put forward at the briefing, and I believe that there was no overwhelming support and enthusiasm for that particular design. So we're not too far off getting it right. Dare I say, maybe 80, 90%, 95% done and dusted with the final design. But providing we get this a little bit of additional tick off and we don't look back in a number of years saying, geez, if only we had have done X, Y, Z. Or maybe we should have looked at A, B, C. And I think that's the whole premise behind this motion by the two Gordon Ward councillors. With the Marion Street Theatre rebuild, where there is a will and there is a way to get it done. And the next major hurdle is to get the funding. So, councillors, it is beholden on all of us, should we wish this project to progress, that we find a way to fund it. And we can get it done within this term, if we so desire. We have a short council term, but we can be seen as a council that is a can-do. We can deliver the Marion Street Theatre. We've also got the basketball. We have Norman Griffiths being commenced very shortly. We will certainly be seen by the community as a whole, providing facilities. Not just talk, but actually actions. And that's a wonderful legacy to leave. So to our two Gordon Ward councillors, the ball's in your court. Let's go and make it happen. Councillors, if there are any further speakers to the matter, otherwise I'll put the motion. Councillor Lennon, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's been a very useful discussion, and I thank all the councillors and staff for all that you've said. Councillor Ward and I didn't enter into this motion lightly. We want the Marion Street Theatre to proceed and to proceed as soon as quickly, and we recognise that the sooner the better. I'm not quite sure what was meant by learning about the liquidated damages. Certainly the more we can learn about the implications of this. I would like to know that if this process can end soon, and I want it to end soon, as soon as possible, 60 days or less, that as soon as it does end, that we can then resume work with all the architects and everyone else as soon as possible, without any further delay. But beyond that, look, this is a wonderful project. We don't enter into this lightly. Thank you all for your consideration, and I understand your reluctance. Councillor Ward and I were just as reluctant. Thank you.
Councillors, I'll put the motion as printed up on the screen with that minor addition of maximum. All those in favour? Councillors Alec Taylor, Councillor Kim Wheatley, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Ward, Councillor Smith, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Nye, Councillor Pettit. Those against? Councillors Spencer and Kay. The motion is carried. Councillors, we've gone through all the agenda items. We have business without notice subject to clause 9.3 of the Code of Meeting Practice. There is none. Questions with notice. There was one.
And that's been included, the responses in the Greens, Mr Mayor?
Thank you, General Manager. Inspections?
There are none, Mr
There are
Mayor.
none. That's it. Councillors, I declare the meeting closed at 9:39. Thank you for your indulgence, and thank you to the gallery for your patience and being here. Thank you one and all.